Hey traders, Rocky here, and we're taking a look at the markets. It's actually about 2 a.m. Eastern, so we're looking at the early part of the European Open, and a little bragging rights for your fearless leader. We had the Austin Poker Championships for Simpler HQ. Yours truly came in second place, and it's the first time I've ever actually played poker. Loved it. I've actually really never gambled, slots, that kind of stuff, but it was a very interesting foray into another aspect of money management. And so much like trading, it's the trades you don't take that are so key, and it's the hands that you fold that are so key. And I'm sure I'll be thinking a lot about tonight in terms of just the fun of playing poker. We had a group of 7 tables, and about 50 people played. So it was a blast, and I learned a lot about even my own tendencies, good and bad, at the poker table, and loved it. Absolutely loved it. I'm going to study the game more, and definitely will be bringing some of these lessons to the room. I don't know how many of you are poker players. If you are, shoot me an email back and let me know what you think about poker playing and the analogies and metaphors, the lessons back to trading. My head's just swimming with them right now. So let's dive into the markets right now and let's take a lap through the Forex first. And I'm looking at the US dollar continuing to range in more or less what I'd still consider to be a 2 to 4 o'clock chop, with resistance around that 100 mark. We don't seem to have a lot of luck heading through 98.50. Before 98.50 was a 98.00 psychological level that was holding. And while I'm not necessarily an uber bull here, I really don't want to bet against the US dollar, but I have to mention in equal breath, I really don't want to bet against the euro either. Both are moving sideways. The euro actually in a more organized, narrow sideways channel with a fairly symmetrical triangle that's formed around price action. And I get a lot of questions about whether or not I feel euro could go to parity. And we're just so far ahead of that story. Ask me if we can break 106. And then ask me if I think we can break 105, and on. Because for now, in order to get the breakdown, we're going to have to see a momentum play to the downside. And if that's going to trigger, chances are it's going to be along with the non-farm payroll on Friday. So just want to mention, I'm going to be out in Austin tomorrow. I'll be flying back home tomorrow afternoon. We'll be back in the office, and I'll probably have some updates and just some other things that I picked up here from the different speakers that were at this conference. Just a couple of things that I've learned that I would love to pass on to you guys, and a couple exercises perhaps, aside from playing poker, that I'll share with you. But it's been a tremendous time with really just an incredible group of people. So lucky to even just get a little bit of time out here. Made it a quick trip. Want to get back in the office and prep for a number of hot zones that are going to be fairly interesting for us this week. And again, if we're going to break out of this range on the Euro US, I think non-farm payroll is going to be a pretty good catalyst for that. If you want to confirm the breakdown, by the way, throw an MACD 1226.9 histogram on that chart. If we break through the uptrend line support, look for a red negative MACD. This is a classic Momo trade. And for those of you that are new to the site or thinking about joining, we're going to be having some tutorials that we're finally going to be updating, and those should be going live this weekend. Finally, I will send a link along before we go live, give you a list of what those tutorials are, so you get a better idea of the kind of education support that's waiting for you inside the members area, especially for those of you that are interested in trend following and these macros and intramarket analysis with more of a currency emphasis, but still being able to trade some of those connective threads back to equities, back to futures. So how do I do that? What are the tools that I use? What are some of the nuances? These tutorials will be a big kickstart for that. All right, so I'm going to wander over into the crude market again, making a lap through the 4 Extra. We've been talking about this short here for a while. I know a lot of you are enjoying the move down through the 31.55 major psych level. That's the first profit target. We want to go ahead and ratchet to a break even, which is going to be at 34.05 after hitting the 31.55 initial profit target. Now, relatedly, we're looking for Canadian dollar weakness. And I got an interesting question in the afternoon breakout session about whether or not the Canadian dollar has unhinged from crude oil, and the pair that was kind of cited as observation of this was actually an interesting question, because why didn't the U.S. dollar Canada move up higher in a more in just a more determined way? And a lot of that had to do with the fact that even though the Canadian dollar was weak with the crude oil weakness, the U.S. dollar was also weak. So if you want to know what happens when you have competitive weakness or competitive strength, it mutes, it kind of cancels out a lot of the price action that you would typically want to see. In other words, dollar Canada, okay, perfect. Canadian dollar weakness, crude oil weakness. Why isn't this market moving up in a more significant way? Because along with that Canadian dollar weakness, we had U.S. dollar weakness as well. So while U.S. dollar Canada is one of the more enviable places we're looking for a Canadian dollar short, Euro Canada could be thrown in there as well. Canadian dollar Japanese yen was one that we talked about in the chat room. And this morning, and actually before I left for Austin last week, this is as pure a move in terms of crude oil versus the Dow as you can get. So if we get a little bit of Dow weakness, and that would equate to yen strength, and we get a little bit of crude oil weakness, which would equate to Canadian dollar weakness, all of a sudden we have all the makings for movement to the downside. And it was off that 87.00, as we talked about in the chat room, that short was triggered. So we've been doing a lot more by way of live chat room analysis, live chat room trades, kind of relegating the spreadsheet to some of my longer term position entries. And I will say, it's been a rocky road this year as we try to get on the main themes. What are those themes that are going to take us through Q1? We're still dealing with a tremendous amount of volatility. I think the pound was a great example of that kind of volatility, where we know we have an overall weakness story in the pound, probably the second weakest currency out there, second to the New Zealand dollar. A lot of concern and confusion about Brexit, a lot of concern and confusion about overall what have been flat economic data numbers. For anyone thinking this market rallied and was volatile on the manufacturing PMI today, realize that does not pan out when you look at the price action. It actually was an unscheduled event. The Brexit conversation really is becoming more prominent, and anytime we think the EU and Great Britain are going to be able to find some sort of common ground to cut Great Britain a fair deal, we kind of push Brexit off into Never Land, and the pound rallies. So the initial impact of Brexit for now is negative. Right now, I think the play is certainty versus uncertainty. We'll talk more about that. But what are my favorite places to play the British pound? British pound versus Japanese yen, as we talked about, and also British pound versus US dollar. And this one might surprise you, euro versus British pound. Now, typically, if I'm looking at the euro and the US dollar, I want to be long one, short the other. Why can I have 2 pound shorts and a euro long and a US dollar long coexist? How can I be buying euro and buying US dollar against a British pound? Typically, I want to be on the opposite side of the euro and the US dollar, right? Buy euro, sell US, or sell euro, buy US. How come this can coexist? Because of the overwhelming weakness in the pound sterling, in the British pound. So that is another story that I really want to continue to focus on. And I'm not ruling out some volatility plays later into the week in reaction to non-farm payroll. The direct impact for non-farm payroll will be with the yen and the US dollar, but we'll get peripheral trades through the relationship back to the euro and also ComDoll. So nothing really gets to avoid the volatility of non-farm payroll. I think the individual currency story of the pound isn't necessarily in a direct impact, but that since that pound US is on our watch list, and keep an eye on this downtrend here, since it is on our watch list, it is in that direct impact zone of non-farm payroll. All right, so we have those stories there. Let's wander into the Dow, because this Dow is, somewhat still continuing to give us fits, because while I think the resistance at the bottom line of the wave is holding, the push to lower lows just isn't coming. So if you're wondering, why are we having such a difficult time taking advantage of yen strength? Well, look no further than the Dow. Look no further than the lack of lower lows. Even though we seem to have put in a minor high, right here, a minor high, after that BOJ-led rally, negative interest rates out of the BOJ, and here comes all that risk appetite. Even though we left a minor high, we need to trade down lower through that minor highs low, which is sitting and this is the March contract of the YM. We need to get through 16.2 to really make this a convincing exhaustion, a convincing correction that's now exhausted and is ready to resume that larger trend. Again, the larger trend that I've assessed by looking at the 4 to 6 o'clock angle of the wave and the consistent red grab candles. This is also why I like yen buys. I think the risk aversion, the downtrend will resume, and that's what that trade is all about. Again, think theme, think the narrative, think the story. What's the story behind the Dow? What's the story behind the yen? What's the larger narrative? What's the bigger theme? Risk aversion really is the bigger theme. Okay, so that's pretty much what I've got my eye on for now. Again, I think Euro, US dollar, and Japanese yen are still solid strength stories. New Zealand dollar, British pound, those are solid weakness stories. We take a look at the Aussie after the RBA, and I was looking for the RBA to shed some light on the overall direction of the Aussie. I was probably more bearish than I was bullish, but the trick is it's not enough just to have an opinion. You have to have a setup, and I think moving forward, we may be able to start wandering into the 60-minute, maybe the 30. If we get a little bit more clarity, maybe we'll be able to even wander into the 240 or the 480 and start to look for Aussie shorts. Again, not my favorite tomato can, but it's likely going to be one of the near-term relative performance losers. Perhaps we'll have some opportunity to day trade it tomorrow once we confirm that from a relative performance standpoint, it's worthy of a short. We'll have to find out what will be one of the strength stories tomorrow during the U.S. session that could help us build and execute that short. We've been doing that in the chat room. And I just want to mention, if you cannot join us in the chat room, the chat is posted typically when I'm not out in Austin just killing it in poker. But typically the chat is posted within about 10 to 15 minutes of the chat concluding. It's uploaded in multiple parts, so you can kind of watch it section by section. And again, if you can't attend it live, you can watch the replay almost immediately after it concludes, and you can log into the chat room any time you'd like and talk to, sometimes I'm in the room throughout the day. You can talk to other chatters that are in the room pretty much all day, even sometimes on the weekend. And I also post in the chat the live discussion setups that we have in the chat. So there's a number of ways that you can take advantage of the chat by talking with your fellow traders or myself if I'm in there during the off chat hours, and also seeing the kind of setups that I posted in there. So we have some new ways that we're going to be able to share charts and setups and allow for more discussion about these. I'm hoping to have these live by the end of the month. I'll let you know what those are going to be. But again, the tutorials are going live. The updated tutorials are going live this weekend. So super excited about that. All right, traders, I'll see you in the chat room in the morning, Tuesday. And it'll be a shorter chat because I'm the early presenter tomorrow. But I'll be back in the office, get a premium video out, and we will take a look at the markets as we move into Wednesday and the ADP. See you then.